心が必要で僕の心は必要だ全部ひっくり返しちゃうような競争をくれよ
Shalom and good day all, this is Tehillim29 back again for another anime review, and for this anime review I'll be covering Ron Kamonohashi's Forbidden Deductions. I'll give you a quick synopsis of the story, to which we are given. Ron Kamonohashi was once regarded as a genius at the top of the detective training academy. But after a fatal mistake, he was expelled and forbidden to become a detective. Years later, police officer Totomaru Ishiki knocks on Ron's door seeking help on a serial murder case. He finds Ron, now a messy-haired recluse, who agrees. Together, this mismatched detective team begins solving their first mystery. So as we move into the synopsis of the episode titles, as well as there are 13 in full, I'll probably be covering the review of episode 13 after I finish covering the 12. So there's 13 episodes, so I'll be covering like the first 12 in total. So with the first episode, it's called The Case of the Metropolitan Serial Killer, and in this it gives us a really Crunchyroll would fix up their appearance, especially in regards to how the synopsis is shown, whether it's on the computer to whether it's on a console, just something to which you can see the whole synopsis at large. The Metropolitan Police Department is struggling to investigate a series of murders, yet in this particular murder, if I remember, they end up working out that there was I think it was a corrupt cop that was responsible for the murder scene, and it was really quite interesting as to how the case was solved, because it's actually in the first episode that we meet the character of Ron Kamonohashi, and we are pretty much introduced to Toto first, who goes to Ron Kamonohashi seeking help for this particular type of investigation. Next is The Case of a Locked Room, and it involves a bit of a piggy bank of sorts, and this one, Ron is excited to solve cases by using Toto, but he's not on any good ones, because his boss hasn't yet decided to put him on harder cases to solve. So in this particular episode, we have Ron and Toto trying to unmask the person who was responsible for the death of a particular person, and one of the key things that played an important role in this particular episode was actually a piggy bank, and it took not Ron but Toto to solve the case. Jumping into episode 3, now this is where we get the appearance of a new detective of sorts that is seen on the scene, and we do learn that each of these new detectives that we see in the story sort of like have their certain quirks or abilities to which they sort of excel at. To which episode 3 is The Case of the Benazomi Hot Springs Murder. Now, for this, it's a 2-part story. So the first part of the story basically focuses on the time of events and where it took place. And the second part, which is in episode 4, is where we actually discover who the murderer is. Now, whilst they are on the case, there are like other undercover detectives of sorts, sort of like trying to follow what Toto is doing with Ron, and they're sort of trying to work out why he's on the scene. Next is episode 5, which is the case of the hand collector, to which it gives us the synopsis. Kawasami Omichi was a supremely skilled detective, and it leads to a joint investigation. Yes, this is the case that involves a corrupt officer, and to which the corrupt officer was actually arrested, because within this one we learned that that the suspect is practically already dead, but we've also got someone there who's sort of like discovered who the suspect is, being guilty of another murder, and in the process tries to get away with the crime and moves into the next one. So moving into episode 6, the case of the live broadcast murder. Ron loves a certain TV show that puts a psychic abilities to test. During the live broadcast, we end up getting like a bit of a murder happen on the set, to which it's left for Toto to work on solving the case. And due to the events that take place within the story, we do discover who the suspect is, but we also learn that there's a little bit of foul play at work. And in regards to foul play at work, it's the psychic attempts to sort of like use a means of deception of sorts, just to make his predictions look real, and due to his, I guess, unmasking of how he did such things, and also an attempt in sort of like killing someone on set. Whilst this was occurring, Ron Kamonohashi, or Ron, who is responsible for like the forbidden deductions and also helping Toto out, manages sort of like to swap some things around so he doesn't end up dead, or a person doesn't end up dead like after the first event, and we do end up getting the suspect and the case is solved. Now the next part is a 3-parter, and this revolves around a observatory. Now in this particular observatory, we do end up meeting a new character on scene, which is connected once again to Ron and his past. I'll give the synopsis of what it says about in these particular 3 episodes. So it's the case of observatory murders. Toto and Ron are invited to a meteor shower viewing being held at the Nandan or Island, also whatever the extra additional stuff it says. Moving on to episode 8, Ron is named as main suspect in a murder, and Toto investigates to clear his name. So whilst they're there at this particular observatory, it is suspected that Ron might have been responsible for the murder. And as we move into part 3, for its synopsis, Toto gathers everyone together to explain the truth behind the murders with the name of sort of like the main person responsible. So whilst we have this particular event focused around a observatory, which looks into space and the stars, this story does center around Ron, but it also centers around other things as well, to which this is sort of like the thing that begins to bring Ron a little bit more on board than what he has been beforehand in investigation of murders and whatever else. So in the process, we end up meeting like a teacher of his. And whilst we end up meeting a teacher, we end up meeting someone else, like a bit of an idol star as well, who's been invited to this. And there's, I think, a total of about 6 or 7 people who are invited to this particular event. One being that person who is actually sort of like the head and custodian of the observatory. But we actually do learn that the custodian also plays a bit of a part too, in sort of like arranging the murders to happen at the observatory. And that basically leads to that case being solved. But not long after that case, we get a bit of a cutscene, and we end up meeting someone that is actually connected to Ron's past. But with this, we learn that there's like a certain mark that Ron actually has on him, and it looks like a 9 and a 6 depending on what direction you look at it. And we know from what they leave at the end of, or at the end credits of this particular story, is that these people who carry this mark actually have a certain lineage which is connected to both Moriarty and Sherlock Holmes, and that makes it even it comes across a little bit more interesting in regards to the character story and why he does certain things. And there are certain events that happen within Ron Kamonahashi's forbidden deductions. So once a character is sort of like found out to being guilty, it's like something is set off, which is also connected to this mark that he has, and he's able to convince the person that is, say, responsible for the crime to kill themselves. It's like, what is this hidden lore that's happening within the story here? So jumping into episode 10 to 12. So as we jump into episode 10, it's called The Case of the Poison Latte. Toto is shadowed by a reporter who's a huge fan of his, and for the way that he has solved difficult cases. And whilst we sort of like experience this journey with Toto, they end up going to a cafe to guess who? Ron is actually being one of the staff members at the cafe. And of course, he's making sure that he gets every latte and whatever else correct, and that nothing is done wrong. But whilst they're at the cafe, someone ends up getting cyanide poisoning. And the way that he develops, or the way how Toto solves this case, is he ends up using social media to sort of like track some of the actions of like the suspects that are in there. They do eventually find out who the suspect is and do, of course, arrest them. So jumping into episode 11, it's called The Case of the Mad Chameleon. Now, with this particular case, there is sort of like a rumor of sorts of someone who is coming in, stealing people's mobile phones, etc., from like a certain area. And of course, one of the other detectives is brought on the case. Of course, Ron makes his appearance dressed up in a bit of a disguise. And of course changes his name to, in a way, mock this particular detective. Whilst the Toto meets Kawasemi, which is like the other detective, while on a business trip to Aichi's. So Kawasemi's been in a bit of a slump since losing some cases, and whilst he's there, we have Toto trying to help solve the crime, and we realize that the person who is responsible for the crime isn't quite who you expect it is, but we do know about their height and who they are. And not long after the case is solved, we move on to the next episode, which is the case of the Yagadami Sama family. Now, with this connects to another person connected to Ron's past, and Ron agrees to take on Spit's search request in exchange to obtaining a file on a bloody murder. He's also seeking to find information in regards to Spitz's family, because there's some members of his family that he's trying to find and he's having trouble finding them. And he's, of course, asked Ron and Toto for help. They do end up finding someone in connection to this particular event. And we then move on to sort of part 2 of the event, which is episode 13, to which I will now work on to watching and sharing what I can of this story. Oh, I must remember that they ended up coming across a village in regards to this particular place, to which they found a link to which his family had been to. So as we continue to move into the 13th episode, it is discovered, Toto discovers that the person responsible for the murder is the mayor. I will not give the name of the mayor, but we also learn that he has, I think it's a granddaughter there as well, by the name of Mee. So at the mountain village to which they're at, Spitz does get a reunion with his brother who is there, and he shares his background as to why he stayed where he is in this particular village. So after Toto and Ron leave the scene, we do end up returning back to a different place. So we have Spitz returning to the academy, trying to recover a file which is connected to Ron Kamonohashi's past, only to be caught by the principal. We learn that the principal has a special message that is for Ron himself, but he decides to let Spitz and Toto hear the message expressly, so he can also use them to help investigate the clues of the event that took place in the academy to which he was accused of murder. But we don't actually know that he was responsible for the murder as of yet. As the story continues within the 13th episode, we learn that there is a secret organization which is called the House of M. So seeing that the name of Moriarty has already been brought up in the series, I wouldn't be surprised if the M stands for Moriarty, considering that there's meant to be members that are within the Moriarty Holmes bloodline that have had their appearances shown in the story. As we start to move into the end credits of this particular episode, we do get confirmation that it is in fact the House of Moriarty. We do learn a couple of the names of people who work alongside with the House of Moriarty. One character being known as Chris the Ripper. We have Winter. There's another one named Alice, like Alice in Wonderland. And we learn that the firstborn of this particular house is called Milo Moriarty. The fourthborn of the Moriarty house is Winter Moriarty. So as the story ends, we are confirmed that there will be a second season for Ron Kamonohashi's Forbidden Deductions, to which I really hope I'm around to review them. So, moving into the next thing is my afterthoughts in relation to this series. I must admit, meeting these characters in this detective type story, we have Ron Kamonohashi, or I'll just say Ron, to which we have Toto being introduced to him, and also learning along the way within the story that he is someone who has the blood of both the Sherlock Holmes family, but as well as the Moriarty family. So, with him being seen as a half-blood in the House of Moriarty, there is like a couple of members that don't accept him for the time being, but they're also looking for ways that he might actually prove valuable to them. Then there's learning of like other detectives and how they're sort of connected to this case of the House of M, which is now confirmed as the House of Moriarty, including the principal, which we see in this particular episode, or this last episode, and what their connection is, or how that they have a bit of a connection to the crime scene, which was used to accuse Ron of a crime that he's actually innocent of. And now it's up to Ron, Toto, and also Spitz, surname Fire, Spitfire, to work in the next season. So we'll probably see a bit of a trio, rough guess, next season with these particular characters maybe working some more. And I think that'll be absolutely brilliant, because it will be like Sherlock Holmes, Watson, and a Moriarty literally within the story, to which they have to solve the cases which are put in front of them, and how much these cases will actually change not only the characters within the story, but also will there be a change in ranks with some of the characters within the story? Will we get to meet more members of the House of Moriarty? That will be another thing. Will they then play a bigger part in the second season than what they did in the first season? Jumping into the next thing, and that is the area of the racing. Now, for the main characters, I think I'll just give them an 8 out of 10. For the supporting characters, I will give, once again, an 8 out of 10. The supporting characters mainly being the secondary character, not really of interest. Sort of, they might have played the victim, or they might have played someone connected to the victim. I'll give it an 8 out of 10, plus also some of the other characters that we know in the story, whether it's the chief or head who looks after Toto and gives him jobs that he can do. Next, we have the soundtrack. Now, I think the soundtrack for this was quite interesting, but I'm not willing to give it a high rating as of yet. So for the time being, I think I'll give it a 7.5 out of 10. But I do actually enjoy the opening and ending soundtracks, and I do find them personally enjoyable. If the main soundtrack worked a little bit better with the opening and endings, I'd probably give it a higher score. But for this time, it's a 7.5 out of 10. Next is the area of the animation, to which I actually quite enjoyed the animation. It was pretty consistent along each and every episode, and also with each and every character that it brought into the episode. For that, I will actually give an 8 out of 10. And last but not least, in relation to the story, to which I give an 8.5 out of 10. It's nice to actually watch another series that sort of like connects both Sherlock Holmes and also Moriarty once again. There was a series that I did watch outside of Ron Kamonohashi's Forbidden Deductions. You might enjoy it as much as this. It's called Moriarty. It's actually done by a different story creator, but it's definitely worth the watch, and I enjoy the characters. But it's more so set in Victorian England. So for the overall story rating in this, I give an 8.5 out of 10. Until then, let's keep it colourful and have yourself an awesome day.
君の心が必要で僕の心は必要だ全部ひっくり返しちゃうような競争をくれよ Hey! 純粋でも順調でも順風でもなんだかんだ全てがつまびらかとかありえないぜいぶかったり気張ったり言い合ったりピチクパチク解決の手だてはなかなかな誤作がさあちょっと心臓気味適正に反乱も来たぜ Hey! 急がなくたっていいじゃないかそれも心配したってノーレスポンスでノーポスでユーモ負担のストーリーに保証書はないけれどベットしてくれありだけいけないフルロジックアップないロップ僕だって1000回1万回挑戦しない理由はない一寸先が闇だなんて言い出したやつから順番にさよならだ最後にバラルのバブクラだろ君の心が必要で僕の心は必要だ当てずっぽを繰り返しちゃうように見えてるとしても結局僕らが勝利しちゃうから競争をくれよ